Hello, my pack, my tribe, to another edition of Howling After Dark. Tonight's episode is, it's about female spirits of vengeance. Reason I wanted to do tonight's show is because, I've experienced some of these things that I'm talking about tonight. One of my favorites, in fact, is the phenomena that has been recorded since the 1600s in Mexico and California, and that is La Llorona. And I have experienced that particular entity before on an investigation, and it's not fun. The legend behind La Llorona is that she's a vengeful spirit of a woman who was scorned on her wedding day. And as a result, does not like men very much. There is also another version of the story where La Llorona is a woman who had her children taken away from her, and so she travels around trying to find her kids and is very vengeful towards anyone that gets in her way. But that's a personal favorite of mine because I actually encountered this spirit when I lived in San Diego, California, which is very close to the Mexican border. And we did an investigation in a little-known kind of ghost town, if you will. I mean, it's a ghost town in the sense that it was built in the 1800s, and there's a lot of buildings that are still abandoned, but people do live there. It's kind of weird. But a little place called Julian, which is up in the mountains. It's probably hour and a half away from the Mexican border. And really an amazing place. I mean, they've kept it well maintained. It still looks the same way it did when it was first built. There are a lot of new additions, of course, as people moved into the area and whatnot. And really the way the town makes most of its money is as a tourist attraction, because it's still the same way it was in 1800s. So we got to investigate this one old theater building, the Julian Theater House, in Joliet, California. And all in all, an amazing investigation. We got a lot of your I don't want to say normal stuff, because what is really normal? But we did get your I guess average would be a better way to say it. Stuff like orbs and shadow figures, and we even caught an apparition. But the thing that really got me that particular investigation was, La Llorona. And I was kind of by myself. I like to investigate by myself sometimes, because I found that since I see them, sometimes they'll feel less intimidated and want to communicate if I'm on my own. And so I was up in the balcony, or I was actually heading up to the balcony, and the rest of the team, there were 4 other members of the team. They were down on the theater floor and up on the stage. It was pretty nice, location, pretty big for, a theater from the 1800s. It was almost 3 stories tall. Anyways, So I'm going up these stairs, and at the top of these stairs, it kind of like spirals around, or like kind of like a half spiral, almost like a crescent moon shape, and upward to the balcony. And the balcony was these really ornate oak carved wooden doors with these beautiful brass doorknobs on them. And like I said, well maintained place. And so I reached to I grabbed these knobs, and they started twisting in my hand. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess somebody doesn't want me to come up here. And, but I'm pretty persistent and stubborn, and, I have no problem admitting that. So, I kind of fought it a little bit and finally got the door open. And when I got the door open, she was right in my face. And, there's been all sorts of different legends and stories about La Llorona for like ages. And one of them is that when you see La Llorona, you know you're about to die. And so, of course, what was stuck in my head, because I just heard about this legend and that there was possibly one of these entities here in this theater that, oh, great, now I'm a dead man. Oh, well, might as well go for broke. And uh, I ended up communicating with La Llorona. Which there are many different La Lloronas, by the way, just like there are many different ladies in white, which is another one we'll be getting into shortly. Uh, but there's many different La Lloronas, and I ended up striking a conversation with this one, um, you know, uh, asking why it was angry, and I was doing live playback EVPs. I'd ask like two or three questions and play it back, and then ask more questions and play it back, and so on and so forth. And I'd ask the first three questions I asked is, why are you angry? Um, let's see, it was, why are you angry? What is your name? And is there a message you need to pass on? And when I played it back, I immediately got, my children were taken. Elena, and tell my children I love them, which I kind of, sort of, in a way, pass that message on, but not like you would probably hope. Um, Through a lot of exhaustive research that took me almost a year, I found out who this lady actually was and the names of her children. And then I found her children, and unfortunately, her children lived long, long, long ago and were long dead by this point. But I did visit their gravesite, and I did pass on that message, and I felt uh, kind of a loving warmth just kind of encompass me, and I just got that feeling like it was her saying thank you. Um, so there's that, and like I said before, there are many legends about La Llorona, and some of it's a lot of, well, I hate to say superstitious. I mean, we're in the paranormal field after all, but uh, yeah, kind of like superstitious buoy, so to speak. because you know how people get when they're afraid of something. But uh, some of it isn't. And I don't know. I thought it was a really cool experience. I kind of, I think, helped her. You know, at least I hope I did. But it is what it is. And it was like one of my earliest cases, and probably one of the ones that kind of lit that fire for doing research. That because there's all sorts of paranormal investigators, and some don't like to do research. I happen to be one of the ones that do, um, and I have a knack for finding stuff out that uh, isn't really available via public library archives. You know what I mean? Like I'm pretty much like a pit bull about that kind of information. So uh, once I'm on it, I'm really on it. Good luck shaking me loose, but you know, uh, I think that's kind of a blessing. Um, okay, so moving on. Another uh, interesting woman of vengeance, I guess you could say. Although I I don't know if most people realize that uh, a female spirit is actually responsible for this. I think, well, like maybe in Salem, oh, excuse me, in Salem, Massachusetts, they might be aware of it. But there's a phenomena called witch mist, and anybody who's ever investigated, they've probably seen a mist, or probably caught a mist on camera in some form or another, and it's kind of a similar phenomenon. Um, Typically, it's like a bluish gray mist, like smoke, and there'll be a lot of it, and it'll show up just kind of random. Um, at least that's what it's been in my experience. But uh, the story goes in Salem, anyways, and I of course mean Salem, Massachusetts, where the witch trials took place. That these mists or the vengeful spirits of the women who were uh, persecuted as being witches, and I guess evidently uh, some of them actually were, although most of them weren't. And that's just kind of guesswork on my part from piecing together many clues over the years. But the thing about this witch mist stuff is like uh, a lot of people report that when they come in contact with it, they suddenly feel very drained and kind of sad and depressed and just not themselves. There have been a couple of cases where suicides have been attributed to witch mist. Even been, I think, one or two murder suicides where someone killed others than themselves. Um, I mean, I don't know if you could find that, like an archive or something. Probably not. But you could probably look up the murder suicide stuff. There in Salem, Massachusetts. Anyways, continuing on. Uh, the first time I ever came across witch mist actually wasn't in Salem. Uh, it was actually in the Bayou area, uh, just north of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where I had lived for a time, and it wasn't like fog. It looks very different than fog does, or any kind of natural mist. I mean, it has a glow about it. I mean, there's really no mistaking what this is. And people have written it off for years as, oh, it's swamp gas. Okay, whatever. Um, Swamp gas doesn't make you feel so sad you want to kill yourself, though. So, I kind of like, all right, it's typical, like, government standpoint on the paranormal. Oh, there's no UFOs, it's just swamp gas or weather balloons or whatever kind of a thing. And that's been their official line, I guess you could say, in Louisiana for years. And of course, nobody who's ever lived in Louisiana for any length of time, especially in the older parts of Louisiana where witch mist have been apparent, believed that story. Pretty much everybody believes that it's the real deal. So it's kind of an interesting thing, like a clash of cultures there when it comes to that stuff. Um, but it's such a weird thing. It really is. It's so strange. I can't even explain it all in words. I really can't. Because you know instinctively that you're looking at something paranormal or supernatural or whatever you want to call it. Because it does not look like a fog or any natural kind of mist. And I'm not saying every instance of it is something paranormal. Of course, there probably are instances where it actually is swamp gas. But every single time, come on. Really? Yeah, I don't buy that. Anyways, one of my actual favorite um, female spirits, I guess you could say, of vengeance is one called, uh, well, in English, I guess you would call her the Lonely Maiden. Uh, we have our own name for her, which is Kinoda. Um, I'm kind of including her in tonight's session, even though she's not technically what you would call a spirit of vengeance. Um, not in the traditional sense, anyways. But uh, I felt that she could still technically fall into that category because there have been cases where people have been hurt. Um, but basically, what she is well, it's a woman whose husband died uh, in battle. Uh, And there were a lot of claims of this that go back to like the American Indian Wars. So you can probably imagine the kind of stuff that was happening at the time. Um, but a woman who became a widow, uh, which is a very different thing in the old native culture, because when you lost someone like that, like hell, even when you got married, like when a woman got married, she not only had to take care of her wifely duties, I guess you could say, but she still also had to perform duties as the daughter of her father, which is uh, kind of like trying to take care of two households, I guess you could say. Um, and if uh, a woman's husband was lost in battle or accidental death or whatever it was, um, they were in mourning, quote unquote, until the father of said bride told her she was no longer in mourning, meaning that she could marry again. Because in Native culture, especially at the time, it it was a little bit about like appearances, I guess you could say. Like not being proper, but like pride, it was such a huge thing, and so yeah, I guess appearances were kind of important as far as stuff like that goes. But that's just how it was. Uh, and so what happens, evidently, is that said woman loses her husband. She becomes a widow, but she's not at all taking it well. And either something happens to her, or uh, she's in such a depression that she ends up killing herself, uh, which is honestly about the closest thing I can attribute to that form of what you could call suicide, I guess, is like ancient samurai committing harikiri. Almost the same kind of emotion and everything behind the act of it. As that. But what happened um, is that when they come back as a spirit, because um, killing yourself, even in native culture, is considered an act of cowardice. And therefore, in our culture, if you are a coward, you cannot get into the happy hunting ground or the Great Plains, or uh, you know, basically whatever the that particular tribe's version of heaven is. Much like Vikings had to show great acts of bravery in order to get in heaven, it was kind of the same way for us. And so, doing anything that could be seen as cowardly was just not a good thing. And so they're kind of trapped here uh, by their own deeds, I guess you could say. And they are very, very vengeful. They typically just do not like white people at all, but they especially don't like white men. Uh, in most cases, anyways. And so I really shocked because I can pass as a white guy. I can. I don't, nothing about my attitude, nothing about my heart and my soul and my mind is white at all. I am a, I'm an Indian and I'm damn proud of it. But I can physically pass for a white guy. And so I really kind of shocked this quinoa. Um, I had experienced when I was investigating in the deserts around New Mexico at some of the mystic locations like the stone arches and stuff. I come across one of these, and uh, she was very angry and very aggressive and very willing to attack me. And then I started speaking to her in her own language, and that threw her for a loop, and kind of caught her off guard. And I was able to explain that I'm actually a native. And after I did, she just kind of disappeared. But there have been reports of like men out there rock climbing, getting pushed off cliffs, and yeah, it can be pretty bad. Um, uh, Scratched and hit, and a couple cases of guys getting hit in the head by thrown rocks and all sorts of stuff like that. They really do not like white people. They really don't. Which, not to say anything against white people, because I love everybody, um, or hate them all equally, depending on whether I think they're an a-hole or not. Um, but it's not a discriminatory thing. I don't discriminate between any one color, but I'm very proud of my people. So it may seem that way sometimes, but yeah, these Kanoa, they really do not like white people, especially not men. Uh, but they are very interesting, and they're really quite different than any other aggressive spirit because they are not afraid to show themselves. In fact, they will go out of their way to show themselves, because especially if they're being very aggressive, because they want to hurt you. If they're being aggressive with you, they want to hurt you, and they want you to know who's hurting you. Um, which makes them very different than almost any other type of spirit that's aggressive. Um, Next is probably one of my favorite um, Celtic legends, if you will, that I've actually seen. I've actually experienced these things. Uh, and it's Celtic, so I'm sure you could probably guess where I'm going. Um, there's these spirits out there that are called banshees, and there's legends that go back thousands of years that talk about them being like mystical, female-like creatures that uh, uh, can kill a man with their scream, basically, or drive them mad, or whatever it is. Uh, I don't really remember all the details on that, but um, and they can actually do that, but they are not just mystical beings. They were actually women who were wronged at some point in their life near their deaths, and they want to take it out on every man. um, and you could actually look this up. The relationship between people who go mad, crazy, and have to be institutionalized in Ireland over the years, and reports of banshees. So yeah, very interesting. Um, I did not see one. I didn't even feel one, but I did hear one, and I actually caught it on my digital recorder. Um, Unfortunately, I don't have the audio anymore, which is probably a good thing because I'd be tempted to play it on air, and that could be bad because of the feedback. It is incredibly loud and high pitched, and it might destroy something. um, but the closest thing in nature I think I could even compare it to is kind of like a bat. Uh, how some bats have that really high pitched kind of squeal, I guess you could say. It's something kind of like that quality, but it's more prolonged. And it gets more powerful and higher pitched as it builds. Uh, I've questioned it uh, over the years. What did I really hear? Kind of a thing. But every time I think about it, I keep coming back to the whole Banshee legend and the things that I was able to decipher um, from not only our evidence that we collected, but evidence from other teams. And I don't know, it's such an amazing place. And there's a lot of other stuff about Ireland and Scotland I could go into, but that's for another show. Um, okay, moving right along. Uh, Everybody's heard of the Lady in White, but there's also Lady in Red, there's Lady in Black, uh, and they all have somewhat similar stories. They were all um, cut down in their prime, I guess you could say. Uh, well, the Lady in Black, the legend behind the Lady in Black, the original Lady in Black, I mean, um, is she was kind of a spinster, uh, slightly older woman, kind of past marrying age for the time, and left with uh, a lot of children. Uh, I guess if I remember the details of the original Lady in Black, and I don't recall the lady's name uh, right off the top of my head. They did somewhat mention uh, a similar story on an episode of Ghost Adventures where they went to Gettysburg, but this lady ran an orphanage, but she really hated children because she could never have any of her own, and a lot of abusive type stuff happened under her uh, control, I guess you could say. And it's like I've always said, if you're an evil person in life, chances are you're going to be an evil person in death too. And so that's kind of where they come in. They really don't like children at all. In fact, a lot of the attacks on children can probably be traced back to a Lady in Black type phenomenon. Um, Lady in Red, well, uh, the original Lady in Red might actually be familiar to a lot of my listeners because, uh, excuse me, she's been covered in TV shows like Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters and stuff. And she was a prostitute at a well-known uh, Wild West structure, like the old Washoe Club, for example. But the original one, I believe, was in the Stanley Hotel, if I'm not mistaken. And she was murdered and therefore has it out for men in general. Uh, they have a tendency to get very aggressive with men, especially if the man in question is kind of provoking or just kind of got that whole alpha male attitude, I guess. The kind of a-hole, jerkish type of a dude. Um, they really don't like that, and they will attack you. There is no doubt in my mind about that because, well, I've been attacked, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. Um, wasn't at the Stanley, however. I was once again was back in San Diego, and we were investigating one of the most haunted places on Earth, and also one of the most grandiose places on Earth. And I would say, honestly, it's probably one of the most haunted hotels in America, and it actually beats out the Stanley Hotel like it was nothing, in my personal opinion. And that place is the Hotel Del Coronado in San Diego. Amazing, amazing place. In its heyday, it hosted a lot of famous people there, including Marilyn Monroe. Uh, Eisenhower went there. Clark Gable and Carol Lombard both stayed there at one point. List goes on and on and on and on. It was really kind of the well-known, well-to-do vacation spot in its heyday. And so, of course, there's a lot of activity attributed to that. But the one that I find to be really interesting, and I, I would technically have to classify her as a quote unquote lady in red, even though no one ever sees her in red. Um, in fact, I believe they actually refer to her as a lady in gray, but I don't think that term technically fits, just because of what happened to her. Uh, this lady, and once again, I don't really recall her name right off the top of my head, but you can look it up. Just look up Hotel Del Coronado haunting, and it'll probably tell you all about what I'm about to say. Uh, this girl was in love. She was so in love. Um, and she had been impregnated by this man who evidently already had a family. And she went to the Hotel Del Coronado to find him. And this is back in the early 1900s, like maybe 1920. I mean, really early 1900s. And she had gone there to find him, and a lot of stuff happened. I don't want to get into it all because I don't remember it all, to be honest. But she was pregnant, and I guess she confronted the guy, and they don't know if he killed her or if they had it out. She ended up killing herself or whatever. But what they do know is that her body was found on the steps in the rear of the hotel, which is right on the beach, pretty much. And it's actually right in between the beach and these like really beautiful bungalows. And she she isn't always aggressive, but she is aggressive towards certain males. I think she gets aggressive towards men who look like the man who scorned and possibly killed her. Uh, but it's still a mystery. I mean, they know that she died. They just don't. They don't know if it was murder or suicide or whatever. Um, so I think that technically qualifies her as kind of a lady in red. Just saying. Um, so, very interesting, those two. Um, I have seen her spirit. I've actually caught her spirit before on camera. Uh, of course, this was before the invention of YouTube. So, uh, I don't know where that footage is. It could be anywhere at this point. Um, Another well-known uh, she's not typically a spirit of vengeance, I would say, but I think she's definitely worth mentioning. Uh, there have been times when she's gotten aggressive with certain people, uh, but that's really not her like mo. I just think that she's worth mentioning because of who she was and what she did and everything that she accomplished. And her and her husband basically built a good chunk of Denver, Colorado. And I am, of course, referring to a lady that they called the unsinkable Molly Brown. Uh, her husband, whose first name I believe was uh, Ray, or maybe Roy. I don't remember, but he was very well off. He had amassed a lot of wealth in gold mines, and then later on in the railroad. He was actually, I think, one of the board members at one point of the Union Pacific Railroad. Uh, but they called her the unsinkable Molly Brown because she had actually survived the sinking of the Titanic. Um, but before even the Titanic happened, she built, uh, or rather, her husband built for her a hotel for her to run, and that was to be like her business, and it was for many years. A place called the Brown Hotel or the Brown Palace, and the Brown Palace is actually, in my opinion, more haunted than the Stanley Hotel, which is very haunted, by the way. So that's saying a lot. Um, but she has gotten aggressive with certain people, mainly people that are disrespectful to her establishment, which, let's face it, who does that sound like? Men, gotta say. Most women would never act that idiotic, although I suppose some would. But most of her aggressiveness has been towards men. So I felt that she qualified enough to be a part of tonight's festivities. Let's see. Who else do we got? We got. Oh, geez. One of my favorites, actually. There's this one woman. Her name is Elizabeth. And she does not like people in her room, period. And what makes Elizabeth and her room special, which is what actually draws people to it, is that she had one of these staterooms on the Queen Mary, which, for those that don't know their history, the Queen Mary was a luxury liner, much like the Titanic was. It did actually sink at one point, and then they raised it and refurbished it in the whole 9 yards. Now it's a big tourist attraction out there in Long Beach, California. And she had one of the bigger, like, staterooms, which is, uh, definitely a good place to investigate, architecturally speaking, because it's big. Uh, and there is a lot of activity there, but she doesn't like people invading her room, and yet people do because of the stuff that they get. Um, but she has attacked people before. There was one report that this guy had gone in her room, and I don't know what he did or said or anything of that nature, but evidently he ticked her off big time. And he was there with a group that was investigating. Thank you. Becky just looked it up for me. Molly's husband's name was James Joseph Brown, or J.J. Brown. Both awesome people, so I definitely recommend reading into that history. But anyways, going back to what I was talking about, Elizabeth was one of the people there, and they don't know much about her, uh, other than her name. Uh, Her name was Elizabeth Shue, 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 and she evidently came from money, uh, even to afford going on the Queen Mary, which was the luxury liner of its time. Um, but she got a stateroom, which is like basically the most expensive room you could get, and so she really doesn't like people in there. Uh, I'm not entirely sure what happened to her. I never did get to figure that out. So if anybody feels like going to Long Beach and you do an investigation there and you find these answers out, let me know. Um, she, I did experience her, uh, and I have gotten EVPs and couple picture shots of her, which unfortunately, a lot of the stuff I used to have, I don't have anymore. A lot of my stuff years ago was stolen out of my garage at the time, so uh, unfortunately, a lot of that stuff I don't have anymore. But it was pretty amazing, and she didn't really have a problem with me because I didn't. I don't think I like disrespected her at all, really. And if memory serves me correctly, I actually knocked on her door before I came in. Um, so she did, kind of communicate with me for a good long while. Um, so I don't know if she died in the wreck or what exactly happened to her, but she can be pretty aggressive. Um, and she doesn't really like anybody in her room, and she'll make you know it. Trust me. I've seen it. Um, Another really cool one actually is in Pittsburgh, which is one of my favorite haunted cities in America, actually, because such an interesting history. But at Old Fort Pitt, there is uh, a female uh, settler woman, I guess you could say. Uh, Oh, she did not like me at all. I think because I was native, and they were all afraid and angry at natives back then. So, yeah, it really just did not like me, and it got pretty aggressive with me. I had bruises on my arms for like 2, 3 weeks. I had a couple scratches, and I had some stuff thrown at me. Uh, and we had actually encountered her inside like this area. It was like a kind of like a saloon or like a mini saloon actually. Um, that was located within like a restaurant slash hotel kind of a thing. But she was just mean, like downright mean. Uh, think of the meanest old lady you've ever seen, and then give her some crack, and that's about how mean she was. Uh, so yeah, pretty bad that one. Um, another personal favorite of mine And by favorite, I mean not at all. um, eh, because of what she did. Um, I forgot to finish the what I was saying about the guy that went into Elizabeth's room on the Queen Mary. He had somehow pissed her off, and uh, she had ended up following him, and he went outside and was right by the railing on the it's like I think it was like promenade deck, and she pushed him over the railing, and he fell into the water. Uh, Luckily, it was in the water, not on the other side of the ship, which would have been very painful because it was concrete. Um, but even so, he needed to be rescued and ended up going to the hospital, and it was pretty bad. Uh, but yeah, going back to what I was saying before, there's a lot of them out there, and a lot of them can be classified as like a lady in white or La Llorona or whatever. Um, but a lot of them just kind of escape uh, that labeling, I guess, and kind of fall under their own thing. One of those is uh, I think she was like a maid, uh, and she was at Pico House Hotel, which was built by Governor Pio Pico after California seceded into the United States, which was like 1869, I think. Uh, but regardless, it was around late 1800s, let's say that. And she was like a maid or something there, and she was not a nice lady uh, at all in life. She was really kind of like one of those types that was always yelling at people and then or yelling at people and then smacking them, that kind of a thing. And she was just kind of brutal about it, really, and non-discriminate. If you were in her way at all, trust me, you knew it. Uh, I don't know what her situation was or why she was like that, but uh, that's how she was, and she was like that when she was alive. And so you can imagine what she's like now that she's on the other side, uh, being able to do things that people in general can't do. And so I think that's given her that little boost of confidence, but not in a good way. You know what I mean? Like, like just not good. This lady, um, and there were a lot of stories and speculation about her, and a lot of the things that took place there, uh, having something to do with it and all that. But it was just amazing. Because what it was really is like she was so angry that it made her so strong. Like she could pick stuff up, and I'm not talking little stuff, and throw it. Or she could pick up, like books or something, and literally chuck it like across the room. I mean, she was strong, really strong, um, which isn't, really typical. Um, then there's, sheesh, uh, there's one called The Lady in the Woods, and she's not always aggressive, like the others, but uh, she doesn't like trespassers on her land. So she'll let you know that you're not really wanted there, but if it happens, what are you gonna do? Uh, in that situation where you're communicating with someone, and then all of a sudden you say or do something to take them off, and you're getting smacked in the back of the head out of nowhere. I mean, what are you really going to say about that? There's really not much to say. It's just like, oh, okay, yep. Um, so great and powerful experience, definitely. Even though it wasn't like the most friendly thing in the world, but it is what it is. But definitely, she does not like people in her woods, as she would call them. Uh, why she was there or why she believes them to be her woods, I don't know exactly, but I do have suspicions about it. I would like to go back there one day and kind of try and figure it out for sure, but uh, I think that all this land around here was actually burnt at one point to make it easier to dig, or at least that was the thought process behind it. Um, and I think that upset a lot of spirits because you got to remember, like for the time, most people didn't get buried in like graveyards, not even like Boot Hill, for example, but uh, most of them actually got buried on their own property. So who knows? Maybe she had a cabin there and she's buried on the land, and now the cabin's long gone, but like people are still coming through and traipsing over where her like rose bushes used to be, or whatever it is, just doing something to set her off, and then they're attacked. Um, so on the one hand, I can't really blame her for that, but on the other, um, nobody wants to be attacked. That's just flat out. Anyways, uh, moving on to other parts of the world, there is vengeful lady spirits, I guess you could say, that have been seen in China, India, Russia, um, when it was, Russia, uh, all over Japan and Korea and Thailand and, a lot of places in Europe, Germany and Norway and down in Italy. Um, and what this lady appears to be is kind of a really distraught woman who, well, the original legend goes like this: that this woman was kind of just abandoned on the side of the road, out in the middle of nowhere, and then had an accident and died on the road. And so people have been reporting this white dress, and that's why a lot of people attribute this woman to a lady in white. Well, she does kind of fall into that category, but not really, and I'll explain why. Uh, a lady in white typically, or at least according to all my research, is a woman who was wronged by a man, stood up by a man, uh, killed by a man, somehow abused or tormented by a man on her wedding day. And she's very, 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 very extremely angry at men. So, um, because of that, though, a lot of people think that she's a lady in white, and she's not. There is actually a difference, uh, albeit a subtle one. Uh, and that is the fact that she actually never married at all. She was never even engaged. Uh, but they do refer to her, a lot of people do refer to her as a lady in white because that's typically what she wears. Because uh, what? Sorry. Uh, that was weird. Anyways, and there are many different types of spirits of vengeance. There's not just females, by the way. There's male ones too. Um, but that ain't what the show's about tonight. It's about the ladies. And, well, you ladies know how you get. I'm just kidding. um, One of the most interesting ladies of vengeance, or lady spirits of vengeance, I should say, is a representation of uh, Persephone. Uh, and this is actually a spirit that has been experienced in Greece for years. I mean, since ancient times, people have been running into the spirit, evidently. Uh, and it's not necessarily Persephone, but that's what they attribute it to because of the way it looks. Um, it's technically a lady in black, and it's very angry, very aggressive, especially towards men. And it kind of has like that ancient Grecian style of dress, like the toga or what have you, but just in black. And people have been attacked by this thing for years. But here's why I don't think it qualifies as a lady in black. Because a lady in black was wronged, was scorned, was murdered by a man. Whereas this Persephone type entity is more like I don't know quite the word to use for it, like an amalgam almost of people's fear and anxiety. I'm not certain that this Persephone type thing was ever really alive in the sense that we know it. Um, because there's quite a few of them there. Uh, the the other big difference is that the type of aggression. Um, because a lady in black typically will punch, they'll scratch, they'll claw, they'll push, they'll pull, that kind of a thing. Whereas uh, this Persephone type thing uh, doesn't attack that way. It's more sneaky. Like you will get scratched, but you won't notice it until like the next day, or like you'll get pebbles thrown at you, but it doesn't really hit you that hard, so you kind of throw it off as just nothing. Uh, or like it's aggressive, but it's not aggressive to the point where it does any permanent damage to somebody. It's more like it's going, look, you need to get the hell out of here, kind of aggression. Um, there is a phenomena in Asia, well, parts of China really, um, that they actually refer to as the Dragon Lady. And that one's actually very interesting because it is very aggressive. It does not like men at all. It doesn't really like women either, but especially doesn't like men. And the thing about it is when it attacks, it doesn't scratch, it doesn't bite, it doesn't claw, it doesn't push you, it doesn't try to push you downstairs or pull you into tripping or whatever like a normal spirit would. What these things actually do is attack people with fire. And what I mean by that is a lot of people see them and then completely freak out because the whole theory behind it is that when you see them, you know you're about to like die in a fire. Uh, Whether it be like a house fire, there's been some cases of spontaneous human combustion that have been tied back to these things, at least in theory. Uh, um, my name for them is Phoenix Ladies, but uh, some some of the locals there refer to them as the Ladies of Fire, or at least that's how it was translated to me because I don't speak Greek. Um, but they're definitely very interesting and very powerful. Fortunately, there doesn't seem to be a lot of them, and they're kind of isolated to these tiny little pockets of areas um, that are usually well away from very lived in places, cities, what have you. Uh, there's also another version of the same thing that Yeah, it just appears as a woman with wings. Uh, Kind of like the female version of Mothman, sort of. But difference is where Mothman seems to like warn people about impending doom, and that'll be another show, also, by the way. Um, what Moth Lady, I guess I'll call her. She kind of goes in exact opposite direction from that, and anyone that comes across her is about to suffer some horrible event, uh, house fire, death in the family, death of themselves, uh, earthquakes, volcanoes, monsoons, whatever it is. And not only that, this entity will actually actively try and make it happen. So, yeah. Uh, Another one, and I'm not sure why they call her the white fox, but they do. Uh, and there seems to be me, anyways, more than one of them. And I haven't been to this place. I would love to go someday. I just haven't been there yet. It's actually in Nepal, up in the Himalayas. There's this entity or spirit uh, that they refer to as the white fox. And I'm not entirely sure why they call it, or her, whatever, the white fox, because I don't know. I don't know. It's not like she's a fox, or not literally a fox. Anyways, I mean, she might be attractive. I don't know. I don't really want to find out either because they're pretty mean. But uh, that's what they call them for whatever reason. And what they basically do is the people that are trying to climb up into the Himalayas to visit one of the monasteries, or just even just trying to cross over the Himalayas to the other side, or just to climb up the mountain, or whatever it is. When these leaders are seen, they'll actually kind of lead people astray so that they end up getting lost. And in many cases, when you're at that kind of altitude, when you're lost, you die. And that's actually been reported as well. Um, and then there's the Lady in White. The original Lady in White story that I heard, um, it's really kind of heartbreaking. Girl was supposed to get married. Uh, Either got stood up at the altar, or the the potential groom got in some kind of accident, couldn't make it, or something, and she didn't have a car, so and she didn't want to bother anybody, and just wanted to get there as fast as she could, and for whatever reason ended up either driving herself or walking herself down the road, and then would get struck by uh, another vehicle and die. And so she wanders these roads and highways and stuff looking for her groom, because she never made it to him, obviously. But she can be very aggressive, and the thing about her is, from going by the reports, anyways, she will actively cause accidents. I don't know if it's out of loneliness or whatever, but I mean, to me, that's pretty aggressive. Um, and of course, there are many variations of that story. Not all of them were killed on the road. Some of them were murdered. Some of them killed themselves. Some of them just had fatal accidents. Uh, just like everyone else, their stories differ sometimes. Doesn't mean it's not true what they're saying. It's just different people experience different things. Um, there have also been reports on the flip side of that where, like, a lady in white will actually rescue somebody from a car crash. There have been some reports of stuff like that, um, which I actually found to be interesting because it makes me wonder what the real deal is. You know, have we gotten it wrong? That kind of thing. And I always want to look into it. And uh, so far, I found that in most of these locations, what you see is what you get. There's really no really reading between the lines. In others, like, nothing makes sense. And you kind of really have to decipher what's going on for yourself. And so I could sit here and I could, of course, talk about these ladies like I have been all night, but really the best way to figure this stuff out is just to experience it yourself. And the best way to do that is through research, because you can research locations where some poor woman died, and maybe her circumstances fit the bill of one of these vengeful archetypes, I guess you could say. And so you go and investigate to find out if they are actually what we think, or if she's just lashing out, or what. you know. But that goes with anything in the paranormal. I think that's the best way to not just find out information about what's going on, but also to investigate in general, because you can use that history to get results rather than just flat out provoking, which provoking has its place, but I don't think provoking is something that you should do like all the time. Uh, and I don't think it's warranted in every single situation. Um, but that's me. And of course, people are going to have different opinions, and of course, they're entitled to them. But I will say this: unless you really know how to do provoking, I would not attempt it with any of the things I've been talking about tonight, because they can hurt you. And for the record, ladies, just so you know, there are male versions of all this stuff too. They're not as common for whatever reason, but they do exist. um, Another really interesting uh, one is one of the oldest stories out there, actually. Uh, what ancient man called mermaid. Um, I think there might be something to it. I've never experienced anything with them. I've never seen anything to make me think that they might be real. But looking at historical reports and finding everything out about the person that filed the report, there were, of course, cases where guys were drunk out of their minds, and who knows what they really saw. But for every like 10 of those, I would say, like, there's one in there somewhere of somebody who actually experienced something. Um, so it kind of makes me feel like they're a spirit of some sort, uh, which is why not everyone sees them. But of course, that's just my theory on it. If they're real at all, um, well, I'm trying to remember her name. Another very vengeful spirit from everything I found out was actually a real lady, and she was not a nice lady in life at all. In fact, she was very jealous and petty and mean and aggressive and brutal and just downright evil. And that lady is, of course, Elizabeth Bathory, the lady that they called the Blood Countess. And there's actually historical documentation from actual cases once they found out what she was up to of this. She would take young girls and basically murder them for their blood and then take a bath in it, um, which is how she got the name the Blood Countess. Uh, and of course, the Anne Rice and Twilight fans of today would probably refer to her as a vampire, but she was just very sick in the head, from everything I've discovered, anyways. And just very not a nice lady. And people that have experienced her spirit have talked about how they've been attacked. And I don't mean like just your typical scratching, shoving, whatever. I mean like there are some marks, but like it's mainly like how it feels, because these guys report how they feel like they're being stabbed or uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Stabbed or slashed with different blades and stuff, which is one of the things she was known for. Uh, she loved to torture people. That was like a Merry Christmas for her, was torturing somebody. I'm not even joking. Uh, so yeah, very, very bad. Just bad, bad witty. Another one that very, 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 very aggressive spirit is probably one of the most famous, and probably won't surprise anybody listening, and that is the ghost of Lizzie Borden. She has attacked many, many people um, in that house. And all not all too surprising to me. I mean, given the history, I mean, come on. But she was crazy. I mean, she really was. I mean, like, I don't know if she was just a true sociopath or if she had just snapped, uh, like they think, because they believe that she was, molested by her father. Uh, and there are some historical documents and whatnot to actually support that theory. But she was also suspected of doing other stuff because there were missing persons reports back then. And a missing person back then was kind of a big deal uh, back in the 1800s because, like, everybody knew everybody. Um, and anybody that they didn't know, they got to know pretty quick. I mean, there really wasn't such a thing as a quote unquote stranger. At least not in a lot of communities like that. So having missing persons there was very abnormal for the time period and the area in which all of it took place, which makes me wonder if she didn't have something to do with it. Because even though she no doubt in my mind killed her parents, uh, she was also quite insane. Um, which I know everyone's thinking it. Well, of course she's insane. She killed her parents, but if there was an abusive element, that wouldn't necessarily drive someone to be insane. Uh, but there are other things supposedly at work there. I mean, what we haven't known for a long time, at least not in general, as general knowledge, is that those were not the only Bordens to die in that house. Years before, there was, I think, like a cousin or aunt to Lizzie Borden, or a grandmother or something that lived in that house that killed her children. Um, and I believe she drowned them in a tub or poisoned them. I don't remember which, but either way, it's not good. And she definitely did it. And they hung her, I believe, on the property. Uh, so yeah, she's super aggressive and just straight up weird, um, and not in a good way. uh, I have come across other aggressive female spirits through the years. A lot of them were victims of just heinous crimes. I can't even fathom them, really. Uh, oh, God. Lucretia, uh, Lucretia, what was her last name? She's believed to be one of the first female serial killers. Uh, with her husband's help, she poisoned gentlemen suitors, if you will. Well, she would first seduce them, then she'd poison them, and then her husband would steal all their belongings. And I believe their last name was Brown, but don't quote me on that. Um, but they were uh, what jail was that? I believe it was Old Charleston Jail. I believe. Yeah, it was Old Charleston Jail, and they were both executed. Both the husband and wife were executed in that jail, and not nice things were said as they were dying. Um, which I'm sure everyone knows was actually captured as a spirit box interaction on Ghost Adventures. Um, but yeah, not a nice feeling when she's around at all. I feel kind of sick. I mean, like physically. Uh, the one time that I encountered her, I'm like, yeah, I'm done with this. uh, I'm not going to upchuck on an investigation. Sorry, not going to happen. Um, God, just so many of them, really. Um, and there's some that actually surprised me that they're not vengeful. Uh, like what they call her, the head housekeeper at Preston Castle in Ione, California, who was attacked by uh, two of the inmates and killed down in the basement. It surprises me that she's not super aggressive towards men, uh, really, at all. Because if anybody had a right to be, it would definitely be her. Uh, but just isn't. I don't know if it's because he doesn't believe or what have you, but there it is. Just so many to go by. So many stories. Uh, oh, there was a similar story to Lucretia Brown and her husband. There was another lady who I don't recall her real name off the top of my head, but they nicknamed her the Black Widow, and she was the original Black Widow uh, because she would what's the word I'm looking for? She would see men, uh, you know, different times over the course of years, and she would inevitably uh, make love to them, I guess you could say, and then she would kill them via poison. And I believe her poison of choice was actually ricin, which is a derivative of a castor bean, and it is extremely deadly. Um, it's for years is what they made rat poison out of. Uh, it's actually the poison that was used to assassinate one of our presidents. I don't remember which one, but yeah, not a nice way to go at all. And but they called her the Black Widow, and I don't recall her full name at this point. Uh, and I'm horrible with names. Just a little confession there for you all. I really am. Names are bad uh, until I've spoken it or seen it. Uh, like 4 or 5 times, it won't stick. Um, But there's there were reports, I should say, not so many in our century, but there were reports of a wolf queen who actually liked to attack small children. You can draw your own conclusions there, I'm sure. What I think she actually is a predator, big time. But who knows? Uh, but even with all these aggressive spirits that I've been speaking about tonight, who knows what's really going on there? Like I think in some of those cases, at least, and I'll be testing this theory out, is that even some of your aggressive spirits are just spirits that want to be heard. And they want to feel like there's some kind of continuity to the universe. And so those are the ones that are more apt to open up and communicate. And a lot of the time that they do that, you can actually dialogue with them and perhaps get them to change their point of view. Maybe they won't always be so angry and bitter. Maybe you'll be the one to change that for them. And there's no greater gift that you could give than to accomplish that. It's happened for me more than once. And they were both life-changing experiences. And then there's things like that kind of fit under that billing, but I'm still not quite sure whether or not they were actually ever alive. Like, kind of like mermaids, I guess, would be a good example. I mean, because who knows if they were actually ever alive? They could just be spirits that are very gifted at manifesting, or maybe not. Who knows? Who knows? That plus, who knows what any of those old sailors actually saw when most of them, quite honestly, were jacked up on rum. But point is things are not always what they appear to be. And so it's always good to take that extra step and find out, what are you really dealing with here? Because a lot of the time, it's not what you think. And, but there are these spirits out there. So I would say be careful. Be aware of the history in your surroundings. because the minute that you're not, that's when you slip up and people could potentially get hurt. Um, but yeah, a lot of aggressive women spirits out there. A lot of them were victims of murders, rapes, that kind of thing. Some of them, though, are just, I don't know what their issue is. Like, they just don't like, I don't think they like people at all, but especially not men for whatever reason. And they probably lived in that location uh, in life, which the one I'm talking about right now, it was actually one of the first American homeless shelters, I guess you could say, or poorhouse, that's the word. And a lot of the women that lived there were brutalized pretty much on a daily basis. And so, of course, they're not going to like men there. Um, but how would you know that if you just went there and investigated and didn't do the history? So, history is key, I think, to any really good investigation. And it's a good thing to, really look for all those fine details that will help you decipher what's really going on. Because I think a lot of these things are a little bit misunderstood. I mean, like La Llorona, there's really no misunderstanding that uh, to a certain point. I mean, it is a vengeful spirit. It will take you out if it gets the chance, but on the other hand, think about the intel, you know, uh, that you could get just from striking up a conversation. And maybe they won't talk to you. Maybe they will. You don't know until you try, I guess is my point. But yeah, things are not black and white. They're often gray. And it's good to go into things knowing that. Um, a non-related subject. Uh, things are really kicking up for us, or just starting to. I'm hoping, anyways. I'm in the process of planning a couple events at some of our locations. One of which is the Chase Tower building, which I'm very braggadocious about. I've mentioned in multiple uh, episodes of Howling After Dark. And I will continue to do so because it is just an awesome location. And we get to investigate 8 out of 12 floors of this big, big building. Um, in fact, we do have an investigation coming up there soon. So I'll keep you guys updated about that. Uh, there is some stuff coming up hopefully in October. Uh, I want to have it a little more set in stone before I say anything about it. Um, I'm hopeful that not this year, but next year, me and my team will be able to go to Scarefest in Kentucky, which, for those that don't know, is like the largest paranormal convention anywhere. Like, like everybody goes to this thing that has made a name for themselves in our field. And I'm not talking about just TV celebrities. I mean, like people that have been doing it for ages, like Bill Chappell, or well, I can't say the Warrens anymore, unfortunately. But Lorraine Warren, I believe, is going to the one this year, and I would so love that. So love to see her, you know, before her time's up, because she's, well, unfortunately up there in age. Uh, as far as mortal years go. But to me, her and her husband are kind of immortals, especially in the field of the paranormal. They really kind of pioneered our whole field. I don't think they've gotten nearly enough credit for it. Uh, they were really the first ones to uh, theorize that it was even possible to catch spirit voices or EVPs on a recorder, and they were really kind of the first ones to do it. Um, they also were the ones who invented the idea behind a motion activated camera. Uh, Albeit theirs was, primitive by today's standards, but I mean, the ones we have today wouldn't even exist if it weren't for people like the Warrens. A lot of the stuff that we get to use today was invented by guys like Bill Chappell, and I think if you're going to be real serious about the paranormal field, you need to know who these people are and what they contributed to our field, and what they had to go through, because you got to understand something. It's okay to talk about this stuff today. In 1974, when the Warrens were at their prime and they were doing this stuff like pretty much full time, it was not an issue that was discussed openly. And they were scoffed at a lot. They were ridiculed a lot. But they stuck through with it. And I'm so grateful for that, because they could have just said, okay, well, screw it, we're done. You know, people are going to be like that. Who needs them? They totally could have had that attitude, and it would have been justifiable. Because let's face it, society was a bunch of shits at the time when it comes to this stuff. I mean, absolutely no open-mindedness. So, and of course, I'm speaking in speaking in general uh, about it. I'm not, pointing fingers at any one person or anything. I'm just saying, in general, that's how society was, and it's been like that for a very long time. In fact, I would say it's been like that up until 1990s, late 1990s, like when Ghost Hunters came out. It was, and I'm not a fan of Ghost Hunters. I'll just be honest, but I do have appreciation for the people that have done that show and the show itself, because really it shows like that went mainstream and kind of brought it all to light, that made it okay to talk about. But none of that would have happened without people like the Warrens. So I think if people are serious about being a part of the paranormal field, they need to know the history. They need to know about these people, and they need to learn that there is a proper way to do things. And I'm not saying that there's just one proper way. Of course not. Everybody's different, and they've got different styles, and that's great. But I think that as our field grows, especially now, there needs to be a certain level of professionalism when dealing with the public, because even now, even though it's becoming more accepted, we're still under such scrutiny by the world at large that any mistake that any paranormal investigator makes is magnified tenfold, and the entire paranormal community is judged by it. So I think that people that have seen these paranormal shows a couple times and think they know what they're doing, and going out there by themselves without anyone with any experience at it is a bad idea. It really is, because you don't know what you're doing. Let's face it, you don't. Just because you saw something on TV doesn't mean you know how to do it. I've seen how to, like uh, like sculpt on TV, like on PBS before. It doesn't mean I know how to do it. I've tried. I'm a sucky sculptor, I'll be honest. I'm a pretty good painter. But when working in the 3D realm, it's just, it's not my forte, you know? And I've seen cops plenty of times. It doesn't mean I know how to be a cop, and it's kind of the same thing, just because you've seen it on TV doesn't mean you know how to do it. Hook up with somebody who does, who's been at it for a long time, and learn what you can from them, and then go out on your own. It's certainly what I did. And I think it's what everyone should do. And I'm not trying to bag on anybody. I'm not trying to say that, newbies shouldn't investigate. Of course they should. I just think that they should have somebody with them that knows what they're doing, to make sure that they don't make mistakes that can make things worse, or even what's the word I'm looking for? Demoralize or upset ghosts unnecessarily, because there's no reason for that. I think provoking has its place, like I've said before, and it's not in every situation. It just isn't. So I'm very grateful for Lorraine Warren and Ed Warren. May he rest in peace. And for people like them that came before us, like so many, to even name, really. But especially the women. I have a lot of respect for the women who came before us, like Lorraine Warren, because in a time when it was a very scoffable thing to even mention anything about the paranormal, to be a woman in that world was even worse. Because let's face it, the 70s were not the time of women's lib. Women's lib didn't really kick in until, I would say the 80s, to be honest. Over 100 years after the idea first came out, So, I feel for a lot of these spirits, like I've talked about tonight. I really do. And I think that I've gotten to communicate with some of these things because of that very fact. And I hope everyone that experiences them tries to keep that in mind. because you don't know the real story behind anything until you find out. And that is about my time, folks. I love you all, my pack, my family, my tribe. Stay true, stay believers, and keep hunting. Peace out, my pack.